The military hangar is thick with silent tension as Lieutenant Sofia Reyes walks through the metal doors on a Saturday morning. Her boots echo on the cold concrete as whispers gradually die down around her. She carries a worn leather briefcase under her left arm, her brown eyes fixed on the invisible horizon beyond the parked aircraft. There's something in her determined quietude that speaks louder than any words, causing her colleagues to look away, not out of disdain, but a complex mix of admiration and unease. Sophia arrived at this base 3 months ago, transferred from a special communications unit after an incident nobody dares mention openly. The scars on her neck are visible when she turns her head to the right, pale marks contrasting with her olive skin, telling a story she's never shared. Her black hair is always pulled back in an impeccable bun, revealing the delicate line of her nape where a small Morse code tattoo remains hidden beneath her uniform collar. Silent courage, in dots and dashes only she can decipher. This morning, the hangar buzzes with preparations for a crucial test, a new satellite communications system that cost the government millions and promises to revolutionize military operations in remote areas. Captain Henry Vance, a 52-year-old man with a graying mustache and a posture that speaks of decades in command, oversees the activities with his deep authoritative voice. He's built his career on a reputation for relentless efficiency and iron discipline, qualities that have earned him the respect of his superiors and the fear of his subordinates. Today we will demonstrate this unit's capability to operate the most advanced equipment in the armed forces, Captain Vance declares, his voice booming through the hangar's loudspeakers. Colonel Miller will arrive in an hour, accompanied by a delegation from the Department of Defense. I will not accept failure. Sophia discreetly adjusts the headset around her neck and checks the instruments on the control panel. She spent the last 2 months studying every component of the communications system, memorizing frequencies, protocols, and emergency codes. Her fingers dance across the controls with almost musical precision, the result of years of training on communication systems few at the base fully understand. Sergeant Paul Miller watches Sophia work with a thoughtful expression. He's a 40-year-old veteran of 2 overseas missions who's learned to recognize competence when he sees it. In recent months he's noticed how Sophia solves technical problems that leave other operators baffled, always silently, without seeking recognition or creating conflict. There's something about her dedication that reminds him of his own daughter, a young engineer struggling to establish herself in a male-dominated environment. Miller, verify that all cables are properly connected, the captain orders, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. And you, Reyes, I expect you've studied the manual. We can't afford to improvise today. Sophia nods briefly, her eyes remaining focused on the instruments. She's memorized not only the official manual, but also the technical supplements and error reports from previous tests. She knows every emergency protocol by heart and has identified 3 potential system flaws that no one else has noticed. But she's learned that demonstrating too much knowledge can create more problems than solutions, especially when dealing with Captain Vance. The first hour passes without incident. Technicians perform routine checks as Sophia silently coordinates test communications with other military bases across the country. Her voice is clear and professional as she transmits messages, each word spoken with a precision that reveals years of specialized training. Other operators occasionally glance at her with approval, acknowledging her competence even if they don't express it openly. Colonel Miller arrives promptly at 10 o'clock, accompanied by 3 officers from the Department of Defense and 2 civilian technical consultants. He's a tall, lean man with completely white hair and a presence that commands immediate respect. His blue eyes scan the hangar with meticulous attention, absorbing every detail of the operation he's about to witness. Colonel Miller, Captain Vance greets him with a formal bow. We have the honor of presenting the new satellite communication system in full operation. Our team is prepared to demonstrate its capabilities under real-world conditions. The colonel nods gravely and heads to the observation area, where chairs have been arranged for the visitors. Sophia feels the weight of all eyes on her as she takes her position at the main control panel. Her hands remain steady, but an almost imperceptible line of tension forms on her forehead. She's participated in similar demonstrations before. She knows how pressure can affect even the most experienced operator. Commence the demonstration. Captain Vance commands, his voice thick with expectation. Sophia activates the system with fluid, precise movements. Monitors around the hangar light up with maps, frequencies, and real-time data. She establishes contact with a base in the Amazon, another in the Pantanal, and a third on the northeast coast. Her voice flows through the communication channels with a serenity that reassures listeners and conveys absolute confidence in the technology she operates. Communication established with all designated units, Sophia reports, briefly turning to the captain. All frequencies are clear, and signals show excellent quality. Captain Vance nods with visible satisfaction. For the first 15 minutes, everything goes as planned. Sophia coordinates communications with a mastery that impresses even the technical consultants, who occasionally lean in to whisper approving comments to each other. The system responds precisely to every command, demonstrating the robustness and reliability that were promised. That's when the problem started. A signal interference appeared on the main frequency, causing noise that hampered communication with the Amazonian base. Sophia immediately initiated correction protocols, adjusting the settings to compensate for the interference. Her fingers danced across the controls with a speed that revealed experience in crisis situations, but the interference persisted, gradually intensifying. Captain Vance approached the control panel, his expression hardening with each passing second. The visitors began to murmur amongst themselves, and Sophia could feel the rising tension in the room. She attempted a second series of adjustments, this time completely reconfiguring the transmission parameter. The noise subsided momentarily, but returned with renewed force a few seconds later. "Rise, fix this immediately," Captain Vance muttered through gritted teeth, his voice low but laced with barely contained irritation. Sophia took a deep breath and initiated a third correction protocol, this time completely isolating the problematic frequency and rerouting communications through secondary channels. It was a risky maneuver that required perfect timing and deep technical knowledge, but she had trained for exactly these situations. Her movements remained calm and deliberate, even as she felt the weight of impatient gazes upon her. The maneuver almost worked. For a few precious moments, communication stabilized and the signal quality returned to ideal levels. Sophia allowed herself a moment of silent relief, her shoulders relaxing almost imperceptibly. But then the entire system crashed. The screens went dark simultaneously, the speakers emitted a high-pitched whine, and all communications were abruptly interrupted. The ensuing silence was deafening. Sophia remained motionless before the inert controls, her hands still positioned on the unresponsive buttons. She could hear her own heart pounding as she absorbed the magnitude of what had happened. At her sides, the other operators exchanged glances between her and the captain, awaiting a reaction that was sure to come. "Rise!" Captain Vance's voice echoed through the hangar like thunder, causing some of those present to jump. "What the hell did you do?" Sophia slowly turned to face her superior, her face maintaining a calm professional expression, even as a storm of emotions raged within her. She had followed the correct procedures. She knew this with absolute certainty. The failure wasn't hers, but a combination of external interference and a vulnerability in the system itself that she had detected weeks ago and tried to report through the appropriate channels. "Sir, I executed the emergency protocols as per technical specifications," Sophia replied, her voice remaining firm despite the mounting pressure. "The initial interference suggests an external source that overloaded the protective circuits." "Protocol?" The captain took 2 steps toward her, his face reddening with barely contained anger. "You destroyed a multi-million-dollar demonstration in front of Colonel Miller, and you talk to me about protocols." The hangar had become a silent amphitheater, where everyone watched the unfolding confrontation. Colonel Miller remained in his chair, his blue eyes studying the scene with an inscrutable expression. The other visitors whispered nervously amongst themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the palpable tension that dominated the atmosphere. Sophia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to maintain her composure. She had faced similar situations before, moments where her competence was questioned not by incompetence, but by her mere presence in environments where some believed she shouldn't be. The scars on her neck seemed to throb with painful memories of past confrontations, but she found strength in the memory of all the times she had proven her worth through actions, not words. "With all due respect, sir," Sophia said, her voice low but clear enough to be heard by everyone in the hangar, "the system presented the vulnerability I identified in the technical report from 3 weeks ago. The interference exploited exactly the flaw I flagged as a priority for correction." Captain Vance's face darkened further. Sophia was referring to a document he had received and filed without proper review, considering it overly technical and likely unnecessary. Sophia Serenduith Sideri, now in front of important visitors and a catastrophic failure. The mention of the report sounded like a public accusation of negligence. "You're trying to shift the blame for your incompetence onto a report nobody requested." The captain's voice rose several decibels, echoing through the metal structures of the hangar. "Lieutenant Reyes, since you arrived at this base, you have demonstrated a technical arrogance unbecoming of your position, and now, in front of our superiors, you have the audacity to try and hold me responsible for your failure." The words hit Sophia like physical blows, but she remained erect, her eyes fixed on the captain even as she felt the weight of everyone's gaze. There was something in the way he pronounced technical arrogance that carried layers of meaning that went beyond professional criticism. It was an accusation she had heard before, a subtle way of suggesting that her competence was somehow inadequate or undesirable. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his expression revealing growing discomfort with the direction the situation was taking. He had witnessed Sophia's dedication, had seen how she arrived earlier and left later than any other operator, always studying manuals and perfecting techniques. He also knew about the technical report she had submitted, because he had personally delivered it to the captain's office. "Reyes, you managed to establish communication with at least 2 bases before the failure," the sergeant said in an attempt to ease the tension. "That shows that the system was working properly until—" "Sergeant Miller, I didn't ask for your opinion," the captain cut him off, his voice laced with authority. "And as for you, Reyes, I expect a better explanation than conspiracy theories about imaginary reports." Sophia felt a pang of something breaking inside her chest. It wasn't just the words, but the way the captain had so completely disregarded her competence and experience in front of people who could influence her career. She thought of the countless hours she'd spent studying every component of the system, the nights she'd stayed up analyzing technical specifications, the silent dedication she'd poured into a profession she loved, but that constantly tested her in ways her male colleagues rarely faced. "Sir," Sophia said, her voice now carrying a controlled coldness, "the report is filed in your office, dated November 17th, with copies sent to the technical and maintenance departments. The vulnerability specifications are on page 3, risk analysis section." The silence that followed was thick with almost physical tension. Everyone in the hangar knew Sophia was providing far too much specific detail to be making it up. Captain Vance felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him as he tried to recall the documents he'd received in recent weeks. There were so many technical reports that he often filed them without detailed review, relying on his decades of experience to identify truly important issues. It was in this moment of maximum tension that something extraordinary happened. One of the monitors, which had remained dark throughout the discussion, suddenly flickered to light and displayed a message in bright green letters. "Emergency protocol. Activated diversion command." All eyes turned to the screen, and Sophia felt her heart quicken. She instantly recognized what was happening. The system had detected the overall failure and activated an automatic recovery protocol she had discreetly programmed into the advanced settings. It was a security measure that few operators knew about, and fewer still knew how to implement properly. Captain Vance stared at the screen with a confused expression, clearly not recognizing the message or knowing how to proceed. He turned to the civilian technicians, who simply shook their heads, indicating they were also unfamiliar with this specific protocol. The message continued to flash, awaiting a response that only Sophia knew how to provide. "What does this mean?" the captain asked, his voice revealing growing frustration. "Does anyone know how to proceed?" Sophia remained silent, studying the screen with a thoughtful expression. She knew exactly which commands to input to reactivate the system, but a part of her mind hesitated. She had just been publicly humiliated, her competence questioned, and her integrity cast into doubt. It would be easy to simply remain silent and let others deal with the situation they had created through negligence and prejudice. But then her eyes met Sergeant Miller's, and she saw something in them that reminded her why she had chosen this career. It wasn't for the superiors who underestimated her, or the bureaucratic systems that often ignored her. It was for the colleagues who relied on her expertise, for the young operators who saw her as an example, and for the larger mission they all shared, to protect and serve their country. "I will need administrative access to the main terminal," Sophia said quietly, addressing Colonel Miller directly. "The recovery protocol requires higher-level commands that only a certified operator can execute." Colonel Miller slowly rose from his chair and walked over to where Sophia stood. His blue eyes studied her for a moment that seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if he were assessing something far beyond her technical capabilities. There was a quality in his gaze that suggested decades of experience in recognizing genuine competence, regardless of where it was found. "Lieutenant Reyes," the colonel said, his voice calm but carrying authority, "do you possess the knowledge to fully restore the system?" "Yes, sir," Sophia replied without hesitation. "The recovery protocol is designed to restore full functionality in approximately 12 minutes, with automatic safety checks at each stage." The colonel nodded once and gestured toward the terminal. Sophia approached the controls as she felt all eyes focused on her. Her hands found the correct commands with the precision of a pianist playing a memorized piece, each movement deliberate and confident. "At this crucial moment, I'd like to pause to share something important with you who are following this story. If it's touching your heart the same way it's touching mine as I write it, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. We do this not only to grow our community, but because we believe that stories like this, that celebrate silent courage and human dignity, need to reach more people. When you subscribe and hit the bell, you're ensuring that you'll receive more narratives that illuminate the anonymous heroes of our everyday lives, those who, like Sophia, face adversity with grace and competence. It's a way to support not only our work, but also the celebration of the values that make our society more just and compassionate. Now let's return to the moment where Sophia was about to demonstrate that true leadership doesn't depend on rank or recognition, but on knowledge, courage, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. Sophia began the command sequence with fluid and precise movements. Her fingers danced across the keyboard in a rhythmic cadence that revealed years of training in high-pressure situations. The first command activated the backup circuits, and immediately several lights began to flash on the consoles around the hangar. The second command initiated a complete diagnostic of all components, with progress bars appearing on the auxiliary screens. "Recovery status, initiating, subsystem integrity check," Sophia narrated calmly, her voice professional and clear. "Estimated time to complete restoration, 11 minutes and 30 seconds. The hangar was completely silent, except for the gentle humming of reactivating equipment and the soft clicking of keys under Sophia Reyes's expert fingers. Captain Vance watched with growing amazement and a mounting discomfort that went beyond simple professional embarrassment. It was the gradual realization that he had severely underestimated one of his most competent subordinates. At that moment, one of the civilian consultants approached Colonel Miller and whispered something in his ear. The colonel nodded gravely and continued observing Sophia work. There was something in the way she handled a crisis, with quiet confidence and methodical precision, that reminded him of other excellent operatives he had encountered during his long career. Recovery system responding normally, Sophia continued. Preparing to re-establish communication with remote bases, all safety protocols are active and monitoring for additional interference. As minutes passed, more systems began to come online. As communication channels re-established one by one, each successful connection announced by a soft beep that gradually filled the hangar with the sounds of normal operation. The monitors displayed clear signals, stable frequencies, and robust connections that demonstrated not only that the system was working, but working better than before the crisis. Sergeant Miller couldn't help but smile slightly as he observed Sophia orchestrating the recovery. He had seen many operators struggle with far simpler problems, but here was someone who not only understood every aspect of the complex system, but had foreseen potential problems and prepared solutions in advance. It was exactly the kind of forward thinking that distinguished truly exceptional operatives from merely competent ones. At exactly 11 minutes and 30 seconds after Sophia had begun, the final system status appeared on all monitors. System fully operational, all functions restored, no errors detected. A gentle chime echoed throughout the hangar, and Sophia stepped back from the controls with a quiet satisfaction that she kept carefully hidden behind her professional demeanor. Restoration complete, sir, Sophia reported to the colonel. All communication channels are active, all safety protocols are functioning normally, and the system is now operating at optimal capacity. Colonel Miller nodded slowly, and then did something that surprised everyone present. He approached Sophia directly, ignoring Captain Vance entirely, and extended his hand. "Excellent work, Lieutenant Reyes," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during the formal demonstrations earlier. That was precisely the kind of problem-solving and technical expertise that we need in our advanced operations. Sophia shook his hand respectfully, but her expression remained controlled. She had learned through hard experience not to celebrate victories too openly, especially in environments where her success might be viewed as a threat rather than an asset. But there was something in the colonel's manner, a recognition that went beyond mere professionalism, that suggested this moment might be different from others she had experienced. Captain Vance watched this exchange with growing unease. He realized that he had not only embarrassed himself professionally, but had done so in front of superior officers, who were now seeing a side of his leadership that he preferred to keep hidden. His treatment of Sophia hadn't just been inappropriate, it had been counterproductive, damaging team morale and potentially compromising mission effectiveness. "Lieutenant Reyes," said the colonel, his voice now carrying an official tone that commanded everyone's attention, "I understand that you submitted a technical report regarding potential vulnerabilities in this system. I would like to review that report personally." Sophia straightened slightly. "Yes, sir." The report detailed 3 potential failure points that could cause exactly the kind of interference we experience today. I submitted it through normal channels 3 weeks ago. The colonel turned his attention to Captain Vance, who was now visibly uncomfortable. "Captain, I trust that you have been reviewing all technical reports from your specialists promptly." There was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch infinitely. Captain Vance felt the weight of his negligence settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had dismissed Sophia's report without proper consideration, and now that dismissal was being exposed in front of the most important visitors his base had received in years. "Yes, sir, I review all reports," he stammered, knowing that his response was inadequate but unable to formulate anything more convincing. Sometimes the volume of technical documentation can be overwhelming. "I see," said the colonel, his tone neutral but carrying implications that everyone present understood. He turned back to Sophia. "Lieutenant Reyes, in your professional opinion, how long would it take to implement permanent corrections for the vulnerabilities you identified?" Sophia considered briefly. "With proper resources and authorization, approximately 2 weeks for complete implementation. Corrections would require some specialized components, but nothing that isn't readily available through normal procurement channels." "Very well. I want you to prepare a detailed implementation plan. You'll report directly to my office as to progress and requirements." The colonel paused and looked around the hangar at all the assembled personnel. "I think everyone here has learned something valuable today about the importance of listening to technical expertise, regardless of where it comes from." The words carried a weight that everyone understood. This wasn't just about technical reports or system failures. It was about recognition, respect, and a kind of silent courage that doesn't announce itself but reveals itself in moments of crisis. Captain Vance felt something shift inside his chest, a mixture of shame, realization, and perhaps the beginning of respect for someone he had severely underestimated. He watched Sophia calmly organizing her materials, preparing to return to her normal duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone in the hangar knew that something profound had occurred. The other personnel began dispersing slowly, returning to their various responsibilities, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a new current of respect flowing through conversations, a recognition that competence and expertise could emerge from unexpected sources, and that true leadership often revealed itself in quiet moments rather than loud proclamations. As the visitors prepared to leave, the colonel approached Sophia a final time. "Lieutenant Reyes, I'll be recommending you for advancement to Specialized Communications Command. Your technical skills and calm under pressure are exactly what we need for our most critical operations." Sophia nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to serve where I can be most effective." After everyone had departed, Sophia remained in the hangar for a few minutes, running final checks on the systems and ensuring that everything was properly documented for the next shift. Sergeant Miller approached her quietly. "That was impressive handling today," he said simply. "Not just the technical recovery, but how you maintained your composure throughout all of that." Sophia looked up from her checklist. "The mission always comes first, Sergeant. Personal feelings can't interfere with operational effectiveness." "Still," he continued, "what you did today, that takes a special kind of strength. The way you handled yourself under pressure, not just from a system failure, but from other pressures, that showed real character." Sophia smiled slightly, the first genuine smile she had allowed herself all day. "We all have our ways of dealing with adversity, Sergeant. Mine is to focus on what needs to be done and trust that competence will eventually be recognized." As she gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Sophia reflected on the events of the day. The humiliation had been real and painful, but it had also created an opportunity for the truth to reveal itself, not through confrontation or anger, but through quiet competence and a willingness to act when action was needed most. Walking across the hangar toward the exit, she passed the workstation where she had spent so many hours over the past months, learning every detail of systems that few others fully understood. Her sacrifice of time, sleep, and social connections had seemed invisible to many, acknowledged by few, but today it had made a difference that mattered. The setting sun cast long shadows across the hangar windows as Sophia stepped outside into the cool evening air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to master, new obstacles to overcome, but tonight,
she carried with her the knowledge that dignity doesn't depend on recognition from others. It comes from a quiet certainty that you have done your best work, maintained your integrity, and served something larger than yourself. In the distance, she could hear the sound of aircraft preparing for evening operations, their engines humming with a reliability she had helped to ensure. It was a sound that reminded her of why she had chosen this life, not for the glory or recognition, but for the satisfaction that comes from knowing that her skills, her knowledge, and her quiet determination helped keep people safe and missions successful. As she walked toward her quarters, Sophia touched briefly a small Morse code tattoo on her neck, silent courage, a reminder that heroism doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it reveals itself in a willingness to study when others socialize, to persist when others give up, to maintain composure when others lose control, and to act with competence and grace when the moment demands nothing less than excellence. The stars were beginning to appear in the clear evening sky, each a small point of light against the darkness, much like the quiet acts of competence and courage that illuminate the world not through grand gestures, but through a steady, reliable brilliance that guides others safely through storms they might otherwise not survive. Sophia Reyes had proved today that sometimes the greatest victories are not won through confrontation, but through a simple, powerful act of doing what needs to be done, exactly when it needs to be done, with all the skill and dignity that the moment requires.